Welcome to Liberty Monday with Monday, a series dedicated to examining the foundational principles of American liberty, constitutional government, and the ideas that shaped our republic. Today, we begin a multi-part series on one of the most important documents in human history, the Declaration of Independence. This document is often quoted, frequently celebrated, and yet rarely studied in its full context. Our goal in this series is to slow down, read carefully, and understand not only what the Declaration says, but why it says it. In this opening episode, we will focus on the purpose, structure, and philosophical foundation of the Declaration. We will reserve the specific grievances, the detailed charges against the British Crown, for later videos in the series. Why the Declaration of Independence still matters. The Declaration of Independence is more than a historical artifact or a ceremonial document read once a year on July 4th. It is a bold moral and philosophical statement that explains why a people may rightfully separate from an abusive government and what principles must guide any just political order. Adopted on July 4, 1776, the Declaration did not create the United States government. That would come later with the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution. Instead, it announced to the world why independence was necessary and what truths justified the decision. Before examining the grievances in detail, which we will do in later videos, it is essential to understand the structure, purpose, and ideas that frame the entire document. The purpose of the Declaration. The Declaration of Independence was written with several audiences in mind. It was meant to unify the American colonists around shared principles, explain to the British Crown why loyalty had been severed, justify independence before foreign nations, and speak to future generations about the nature of liberty and government. The founders understood that revolution required moral legitimacy, not merely military force. Independence had to be explained, defended, and justified according to reason and principle. Section 1, the Preamble, a justification to the world. The Declaration opens with a formal explanation of why the colonies felt compelled to speak publicly. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another. From the beginning, the founders make clear that political separation is a serious and solemn act. They acknowledge that the world deserves a clear explanation for such a decision and that legitimacy matters in both law and history. This is not a declaration driven by passion or impulse, but by necessity and reason. Section 2, Natural Rights and the Foundation of Legitimate Government. This is the most famous and philosophically significant portion of the Declaration. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Here, the Declaration establishes the idea that human beings possess inherent dignity and moral worth. Rights are described as unalienable, meaning they cannot be given or taken away by government because they do not originate with government. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are identified as core rights that exist prior to any political system. The Declaration then defines the sole legitimate purpose of government. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. With this statement, the founders reject the idea of absolute power. Government exists to protect rights, not to dispense them, and political authority is legitimate only when it is rooted in the consent of the people. The right, and duty, of the people. The Declaration goes further by explaining what happens when government fails in its fundamental purpose. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it. The founders are careful to clarify that they are not encouraging constant rebellion. They acknowledge that prudence dictates long-established governments should not be changed for light or transient causes. However, when abuses become systematic and destructive, the people not only have the right to resist tyranny, they have a responsibility to do so. This principle frames revolution as a moral last resort, undertaken only after sustained injustice. Section 3, the charges against the king, overview only after laying out the philosophical foundation of liberty and just government. The Declaration turns to application. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations. This section applies principle to reality. The grievances that follow are presented as evidence of a consistent pattern of tyranny rather than isolated complaints. While we will examine each grievance in detail in later videos, it is important to understand that this section exists to demonstrate how the British Crown violated the very principles outlined earlier in the document. The philosophy comes first. The facts follow. Section 4, Attempts at Peaceful Resolution. Before formally declaring independence, the colonies emphasized that separation was not their initial goal. In every stage of these oppressions we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. The colonies describe repeated attempts to resolve their disputes peacefully through petitions and appeals to British law, shared history, and common ancestry. These efforts were consistently met with indifference or further abuses, leaving independence as the only remaining option. This section reinforces that the decision to separate was not reckless or rushed, but carefully considered and reluctantly reached. Section V, the Declaration of Independence itself. Only after establishing moral principles, documenting abuses, and recounting failed attempts at reconciliation does the Declaration formally announce independence. These united colonies are, and of right ought to be free and independent states. Here, the colonies assert full political separation from Great Britain and claim the same status enjoyed by other sovereign nations. They declare their authority to conduct war and peace, enter alliances, and engage in commerce as free and independent states. This moment marks the colonies' entry onto the world stage as a new nation. Section V, the Closing Pledge. The Declaration concludes with a solemn pledge. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes and our sacred honor. This was not symbolic language. Signing the declaration was an act of treason against the British Crown, carrying the risk of execution, confiscation of property, and the ruin of families. Liberty was not free. It was pledged, defended, and paid for at great personal cost. Why the Declaration still matters today. The Declaration of Independence remains relevant because it defines why government exists, reminds us that rights precede the state, and provides a moral standard by which all governments may be judged. It affirms that liberty requires courage, responsibility, and vigilance from each generation. The Constitution establishes the structure of government. The Declaration explains why that structure must exist at all. In this introduction, we have examined the ideas, structure, and purpose of the Declaration of Independence. In the episodes that follow, we will take a closer look at the specific grievances, one by one, to see how theory met reality and why the founders believed separation was not only justified, but necessary. Thank you for joining Liberty Monday with Monday. Understanding the Declaration is the first step toward understanding the American experiment itself.